The sound of pennies hitting the checkout counter at Ralph's supermarket echoed through lane 3 like small copper prayers. 1, 2, 3. Harold Miller's arthritic fingers trembled as he counted, thick reading glasses sliding down his nose. 4, 5, 6. It was 6:34 p.m. on a Tuesday in March 1995. The after-work rush had filled the store with tired people buying dinner. But in lane 3, time had slowed to the pace of an 81-year-old widower counting out his survival in pennies. "Take your time, sir," the cashier said softly. Her name tag read Jennifer. She'd seen Harold come through her lane 3 times in 2 weeks. Always pennies, always bread. Harold's worn brown cardigan hung loose on his shoulders. He'd lost 20 pounds since Eleanor died. His hands moved each penny with precision. 53, 54, 55. Behind him, a woman with a full cart sighed audibly. Harold's shoulders hunched lower, embarrassment visible. But he didn't speed up. When you're counting out your last pennies for your only meal, you don't rush. The loaf of Wonder Bread sat on the conveyor belt. Store brand would have been cheaper, but Wonder Bread had been Eleanor's favorite. For 47 years, she'd made him toast every morning. Even 6 months after her funeral, he couldn't buy anything else. $1.29. Harold had counted the pennies 3 times at home. 129 pennies, carried in a cloth bag Eleanor had sewn. But something was wrong. He'd reached 98 pennies and still had 2 piles left. His hands began to shake harder. What Harold didn't know was that 3 feet behind him, Clint Eastwood had stopped loading his groceries and was watching every single penny fall. Harold Miller had not always been a man who counted pennies for bread. For 38 years, he'd worked as a carpenter in Monterey. He'd framed homes, built decks, crafted cabinets. His hands had been strong. Then arthritis came. By 65, he could barely grip a hammer. Forced to retire before his pension was fully vested. Social Security gave him $643 a month. The apartment cost $550. That left $93 for everything else. Food, medicine, electricity. They'd managed. Eleanor had been a genius at stretching a dollar. Day-old bread, wilted vegetables, soup that lasted a week. They'd been poor, but together. Then Eleanor got sick. The breast cancer came fast. No insurance, no savings. They spent everything trying to save her. Harold sold his tools, his truck, even his wedding ring to pay for medications that bought her a few more months. She died on a Tuesday in September, holding his hand, apologizing for the medical bills. Harold kissed her forehead and lied, telling her everything would be fine. It wasn't. The funeral cost $3,000. Harold paid it with a credit card he couldn't afford. Their daughter lived in Seattle with her own struggles. Harold told her to keep what little she could send. For 6 months, he'd been figuring it out, eating once a day, choosing between blood pressure, medication, and food, carrying pennies to the grocery store. It meant standing at a checkout counter, counting coins while strangers sighed and a teenage cashier tried not to cry. Clint Eastwood had lived in Carmel for over 20 years. Tuesday evenings were quiet, fewer crowds. He grabbed his usual items: vegetables, chicken, coffee. His cart was full, the kind of full that represented comfort. He'd chosen lane 3 because it seemed shortest. As he waited, he heard it, the sound of pennies. Not just a few coins. The sound kept going, each small clink drawing out longer than seemed possible. Clint looked up. The old man in front of him was hunched over the counter, counting pennies from a cloth bag. His fingers moved slowly. His hands were shaking. Clint saw the cardigan, worn at the elbows, the thick reading glasses, the single item, 1 loaf of bread, and he saw something else. The way the man held himself with dignity, even while counting pennies. The way he didn't rush, despite impatient sighs. This wasn't a man who'd always been poor. This was a man who'd fallen and was trying to land with grace. Clint had grown up poor in Depression-era Oakland. He remembered his mother counting coins for milk. He remembered his father's eyes when there wasn't work. He remembered what poverty felt like. The old man reached 98 pennies and stopped, recounted. His hands shook harder. The cashier saw it. "Sir, how many do you have?" "I thought I had enough," Harold whispered. "I counted 3 times. "It's okay," Jennifer said. "Let me just—" That's when Clint Eastwood stepped forward. "I'll get it." 3 words, spoken quietly, but they cut through the moment. Harold turned. The man behind him was tall, wearing a denim shirt. His face was familiar. "I'm sorry," Harold said. "I'll pay for your groceries." Clint turned to Jennifer. "Ring up his bread. Add it to my order." "No," Harold said immediately. "I have the money. I just miscounted." "Sir," Clint's voice was gentle but firm. "Please, let me do this." Harold looked at the stranger, saw something in his eyes that wasn't pity. It was recognition. "I can pay," Harold whispered, but his hands shook so badly. Jennifer was crying now. The woman who'd been sighing had gone quiet, face flushed. Clint reached past Harold and gently took the cloth bag. He folded Harold's fingers around it. "Keep your money. Buy yourself something tomorrow, something Eleanor would want you to have." Harold froze, eyes wide. "How did you know my wife's name?" Clint nodded toward the bread. "Wonder bread. That's not poor man's bread. That's love bread. The kind you buy because someone you love preferred it. I'm guessing Eleanor?" Harold's face crumpled. 81 years old, and he started to cry. Quiet tears running down his cheeks. "She died 6 months ago," he whispered. "I'm sorry," Clint said, and meant it. Jennifer rang up the bread, but Clint wasn't done. "Do you have time?" Clint asked. "Time? To shop with me. Help me pick out some things. I could use another opinion." Harold stared, confused. "We're going to fill a cart," Clint said. "Together. Then I'm driving you home. Is that okay?" They started in produce. Harold walked beside Clint like a man in a dream. Clint began filling a basket. "Tomatoes," Clint said. "You like tomatoes?" "Yes," Harold whispered. "Good. What did Eleanor make?" "Vegetable soup, with carrots and celery and potatoes." Clint started loading vegetables. Not for one soup, enough for weeks. They moved through the store. Clint asked questions and Harold answered, voice getting stronger. "What kind of coffee? Chicken or beef?" "I shouldn't," Harold kept saying. "This is too much." "It's groceries," Clint said. "Food. That's basic human dignity." In the cereal aisle, Clint grabbed Cheerios. "Eleanor liked Cheerios?" Harold smiled for the first time. "She ate them every morning, with sliced banana." Clint added bananas. He selected chicken, ground beef, pork chops, milk, eggs, butter. 2 more loaves of Wonder Bread. "So you don't have to count pennies tomorrow." Harold was crying again, silently, tears running while this stranger filled a cart. Other shoppers had started to notice. Jennifer had told the other cashiers. People were watching, some recording, but Clint ignored them. His focus was entirely on Harold. "What else?" "I can't accept this," Harold said. "You're not accepting anything," Clint said. "We're shopping together. 2 guys buying groceries." By checkout, the cart was full. Jennifer rang it up with shaking hands. $147. Clint paid with cash. Didn't look at the total. Clint's truck was parked near the entrance. Harold directed him 3 blocks away. A small apartment complex, peeling paint, but clean. Harold's apartment was number 2B, ground floor, 500 square feet. They carried groceries inside. 4 trips. When Clint saw the apartment, his jaw tightened. Old furniture, but spotless. A small couch, a 1980s television, a card table. The kitchen barely functional. But what struck Clint were the photos. Everywhere. Harold and Eleanor through decades. Young and in love. Old and holding hands. 47 years, Harold said. "We met when I was building her father's deck. She brought me lemonade. I asked her to marry me 3 months later." They put groceries away together. The refrigerator, nearly empty before, slowly filled. When they finished, Clint sat at the card table. Harold made coffee. "Tell me about Eleanor," Clint said, and Harold did. For an hour he talked, about how they'd never had money but had been rich in other ways, about her laugh, her kindness, about the cancer, watching her fade. "I sold everything to keep her alive," Harold said. "My tools, my truck, even my wedding ring. And it still wasn't enough." Clint listened, didn't interrupt. "I'm supposed to take blood pressure medication," Harold continued, "but I had to choose, medicine or food." "How long since you've taken it?" 3 months. And how long since you've had a real meal? 6 weeks, maybe 7. Clint didn't make promises lightly, but sitting in Harold's apartment, looking at photos of 47 years, he made a decision. I'm making calls tomorrow, Clint said. There are programs. I've tried, my Harold said. I make $63 too much to qualify for food assistance. Clint nodded. The cruel gap where people made just enough to disqualify, but nowhere near enough to live. What if it wasn't a program? What if it was just a friend? Harold looked confused. I live 10 minutes from here. I'm giving you my number. Once a week, I'm calling. We're having coffee. We'll talk about Eleanor, whatever you want. I can't ask. You're not asking. I'm offering. Clint wrote a number on a card. And once a month, we're shopping together. Harold shook his head. Why? I know enough, Clint said. I know you counted pennies for bread because it was Eleanor's favorite. I know you're trying to maintain dignity. That's enough. He stood up, counted out $500, set it on the table. That's for your medication. Whatever else you need, consider it payment for helping me shop. Harold stared at the money. I can't. You can. You will. Clint's voice was gentle but firm. Tomorrow you're going to the pharmacy, getting your medication, taking care of yourself, because Eleanor would want you to. And I'm calling next week to ask if you did. Jennifer had called her manager during checkout. The manager called the local newspaper. By Wednesday morning, the Carmel Pinecone published. Local actor helps struggling senior. Small town paper. Everyone reads over breakfast. And Carmel was the kind of town where people took care of their own. By Wednesday afternoon, Harold's phone was ringing. Sarah Chen, restaurant owner. Mr. Miller, free lunch every day. Dr. Patricia Rodriguez. I'm seeing you at no charge for anything you need. St. Mary's Church, food pantry, weekly delivery, the pharmacy covering medications, the senior center, neighbors with casseroles. Harold sat overwhelmed. The phone rang again. Harold, it's Clint. Harold started to cry. I don't understand. Everyone's calling. I've lived here 20 years and barely anyone knew my name. Now they see you, Clint said quietly. They always had the capacity to help. They just needed to see you first. Sometimes all it takes is one person noticing. Then everyone else starts noticing too. You did this. No, I bought groceries. Everyone else did the rest. Because people are fundamentally good. They just need a reminder. Over the next weeks, Harold's life transformed. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. 6 months later, Harold Miller walked into Ralph's on a Tuesday evening. He was wearing a new cardigan. He'd gained back 20 pounds. His hands still shook, but from age now, not hunger. He grabbed a cart and began shopping. Not counting pennies, just shopping. Jennifer was working lane 3. She smiled. Hi, Mr. Miller. How are you? I'm good, Jennifer. Real good. His cart had chicken, vegetables, coffee, bread. Jennifer rang him up. Harold pulled out his wallet. Real bills. He'd been getting disability in addition to Social Security. Dr. Rodriguez had helped him apply. Combined with community support, he could afford to eat, to live with dignity. That'll be $43.50, Harold paid. Added a tip to the charity jar. Mr. Miller? Yes? Thank you for reminding me why I work here. Harold smiled, tipped an imaginary hat. He was meeting Clint for coffee in an hour, their weekly tradition. They'd talk about Eleanor, about movies, about life. Harold no longer counted pennies, but he counted his blessings. And the first was always the same, a stranger who'd noticed. That evening, Harold made vegetable soup, Eleanor's recipe, enough for the week and extra for Mrs. Patterson next door, who was also struggling, because that's what Clint taught him. When you've been helped, you help others. Harold Miller lived for another 8 years. He died peacefully at 89, in the same apartment where Clint had once helped him put away groceries. At his funeral, the church was packed. People he'd helped, neighbors he'd checked on, seniors he'd befriended. Clint Eastwood sat in the back row. He'd continued weekly coffee dates until the end. During the service, Harold's daughter Sarah stood at the podium. She held the cloth bag Eleanor had sewn, the same bag Harold had carried pennies in. My father kept this, Sarah said. Inside there's a note. She opened the bag. Her voice shook. I counted pennies once because I had nothing. A stranger saw me and gave me everything. Not money, dignity. He reminded me I mattered, that Eleanor's love had meant something. He taught me being poor isn't shameful. What's shameful is looking away. I kept these pennies to remember both sides, what it feels like to need, and what it means to give. To whoever finds this, look for people counting pennies. In life, notice them, help them, remind them they matter. Sarah looked at Clint. Mr. Eastwood, thank you for seeing my father. The church was silent except for tears. After the service, Clint walked to the cemetery, stood by Harold's grave, next to Eleanor's, together again. He didn't stay long, just remembered an 81-year-old man counting pennies, a loaf of Wonder Bread. Walking past Ralph's, he stopped, went inside. Clint bought his groceries, started to leave, then noticed an older woman at the next register, counting change, hands shaking. He stopped, waited, watched. Because Harold had taught him, the work never ends, and sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see, one person who remembers everybody counts, even when they're counting pennies, especially then.